And then officials at Paul Allen's Hendrix Museum told me that I was owed nothing for all the work that I'd done to help build the core collections for that museum. I had worked for them expecting that I'd be paid. Now, Paul Allen's museum could have helped me, and they chose not to. I needed help to present Jimi's prophecy, but insights like those in this book are what dominators routinely seek to obstruct and crush. As Rock Prophecy explains, Jimi Hendrix predicted that an asteroid is aimed to impact our planet. Had he lived to present this as he was working to do, or had I been helped by any of the people who instead obstructed me, we would have survived. Our world would have been saved. Rock Prophecy is a story of the end of life here at the hands of agents of hate, in a word, dominators. Paul Allen used his money from Microsoft to fund an unjust lawsuit against the Hendrix Company. Now, I was the writer, so his legal team seems to have been interested in reading my research. That legal staff certainly would have likely examined my writings on file for copyright here at the Library of Congress in Washington, or else they'd be pretty incompetent lawyers. To build their case, it makes sense for them to see if my research contains information that they could use in their lawsuit. Now, the story of Jimi's asteroid prediction is among my writings here, but Paul Allen is a mogul who is heavily invested in media production companies like DreamWorks Movie Studios, and his Microsoft is teamed up with NBC. He's a media mogul who seems to have stumbled across my asteroid research during the Hendrix Microsoft lawsuit. It seems obvious that this is how the asteroid story made its way to the top of the list of world media in the late 20th century. But there are three things to remember regarding Paul Allen's museum. Number one, I orchestrated the acquisition of some of the world's best Hendrix collections for them. Nearly $500,000 was paid for the collections I led them to. Number two, Paul Allen's museum refused to pay me for my work, and then Paul Allen paid for the lawsuit against the Hendrix Company that I worked for and was to be the director of. As a result of that lawsuit, my job was given to Jane, the Japanese-American woman. I was left unemployed and silenced. This is what I believe that lawsuit was specifically intended to accomplish, was to silence me. And third, during the lawsuit, I was writing the story of Jimi's prediction of an asteroid impact. I sent that story here to the Library of Congress for registration, and suddenly Paul Allen's media partners began churning out stories about asteroids, highly publicized stories. During the lawsuit, an official at Mr. Allen's Hendrix Museum said, "Whatever you know about Hendrix, we'll find out about it and use as we see fit." It seemed that's exactly how the asteroid craze started in America. Microsoft media partners, NBC and DreamWorks Movie Studios, they suddenly went hog wild on the asteroid story. The shows that they produced are listed on our website timeline. Now, the fate of civilization is predestined in the orbit of our world through an obstacle course of asteroids. Hendrix realized that as a society, all of our actions must be guided by the knowledge that it's just a matter of time before an asteroid intersects the path of Earth. These impacts are natural. They inspired Jimi to write that people must never be afraid of paths chosen by God. Whether or not this civilization can influence an asteroid in our path depends on a collective effort in building a defense. Now, for many people who haven't researched the issue, there's a misperception that scientists can save us from an incoming rock, or they can blow it up, or they can affect it in some ways. That's incorrect. But rather than present evidence for that here, on our website there's a page of statements from experts who testify that we are unprepared for an asteroid. If you read that web page, you'll see that there's nothing we can do to prevent it, and they say it'll be decades before technology can intervene. In other words, welcome to the Titanic, so to speak. In March of 1996, less than 1 year after Rock Prophecy was seen at the Library of Congress Copyright Office, Bob Dole, who was then the Republican candidate for president, he began proposing that the United States build a system that can shoot down missiles in the sky. Since then, that effort has continued nonstop as the new Missile Defense Agency. Our ruling class considers it impractical to tell us that we need to build weapons against asteroids. People will panic, they believe, an unmanageable scene will result. Instead, government today tells us we need to shoot down missiles from rogue nations, and if rogue nations with intentions to launch missiles at us don't exist, North Korea will either be bribed by our State Department into acting like one, or they'll be provoked into becoming one. Also, that the project to build anti-asteroid technology will look like an effort to shoot down nuclear missiles. It's called asteroid diplomacy, and we're conditioned to listen to this reasoning, and that's what's happening. Our defense agency is mounting a secret and a feeble attempt to build anti-asteroid technology, and they're calling it an anti-missile system. Now, my claim is that the new missile defense program was instigated by Paul Allen and his government cronies, who were all under the influence of rock prophecy in the mid-1990s during the Hendrix Microsoft lawsuit. Their legal teams read my research, and the rest is history. Before I elaborate on that, we should understand why Jimi Hendrix had to find the right way to communicate his vision. During his lifetime, asteroid disasters were considered science fiction. Scientists dismissed all theories of the Earth being prone to destruction from impacts. Well into the 20th century, this is what people believed. Fireballs in the sky didn't become a subject for modern science until the 1950s, after Daniel Barringer and Eugene Shoemaker here had studied the mile-wide crater in Arizona. Scientists had thought that crater was an extinct volcano. Only in the past 40 years have we begun to accept the fact that the Earth is a target. Rather than call a press conference where he'd be misunderstood or stumble through interviews where journalists could filter his statements, Jimi wrote a screenplay for a film that would communicate what had to be said, but he didn't live long enough. Hendrix was removed before he could complete the film. It's as if civilization had a chance to organize a defense in time to ward off disaster, but that chance depended on whether or not we comprehend Hendrix. Jimi said that people are going to feel the physical change of the Earth were the reason for causing it. How have humans caused an impact? Hendrix presents a picture of disaster resulting from our inability to organize world resources in time to stop the rock from coming at us. Now, members of the media will claim that today's asteroid craze was kicked off by a comet that hit Jupiter back in 1994. But the timeline on our website proves otherwise. Consider timing. There have been a handful of asteroid stories published at various points between 1877 and 1994. And as our timeline shows, all of these stories made minor impacts on popular culture. The actual asteroid craze in modern media, characterized by repeated and excessive mass media blockbusters from the New York Times to all major TV networks and Hollywood movies, it's all outlined on our website timeline. Nowhere else is this wave of reports chronicled. No one else was keeping track except for me, because I was watching it all from the start as my insights were ripped off by media elites over the course of several years. Now, the media's unique wave of reports about asteroids escalated in late 1995, about 6 months after Rock Prophecy was seen here at the Library of Congress Copyright Office. My manuscript arrived there at the height of the Hendrix Microsoft lawsuit proceedings, but prior to 1995, all reports and media stories about asteroids are all scattered across the decades in disconnected isolation from each other. By contrast, the intense crescendo of reports triggered after Rock Prophecy was copyrighted, there's the actual copyright date back in June of 1995, which identifies this book as the immediate precursor to the frenzy in media. It's a succession of reports that continued at an uninterrupted peak for 8 years and continues today. Just prior to this media blitz, Rock Prophecy appeared, marking Jimi's prediction as the catalyst for that craze. There was no other directly connected event in 1995 before the media's asteroid fad. My description of this period is the purpose of our website timeline. Rock prophecy preceded the media's wave of reports about asteroids. The number and intensity of these reports are unprecedented in history. Never again can the attention of civilization be introduced to the threat of rocks in such a concentrated way. Everyone has now been trained and conditioned to this issue. While most people shrug off the odds of an impact, most scientists who study the subject agree